Dumelang, Sanbonani, good afternoon, goeiemiddag. Welcome to yet another informative episode of Lentswe, the voice of Transnet, your go-to resource for insights and innovations from industry experts. I'm your host, Buitumela Makokwani, and today's episode will explore the world of fraud prevention and security in line with the Fraud Awareness Campaign. I'm joined by our one and only Eric Niekling, who's the head of investigations at Transnet Corporate Center. He brings years of expertise and experience in investigating fraud and security risks. Today, we'll be unpacking the intricacies of fraud and corruption trends and discuss the prevention strategies within Transnet to eradicate fraud risks. This is an episode you don't want to miss, so stay tuned. So, without any further ado, welcome, Eric. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Boitumela. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Eric. So, firstly, I think it is prudent just to get our listeners a bit of an understanding from an introductory perspective. So, could you kindly just describe your role and responsibilities regarding fraud prevention and investigations?
Yeah, so as you indicated, I head up investigations. My team reports to the chief legal officer. We recently moved from the group chief security officer space into the chief legal officer space. So, from a fraud and corruption fight or a fighting stance against fraud and corruption, we look at it from three perspectives. One is fraud prevention, second being fraud detection, and then investigations comes into play at the end. So fraud prevention is really what it says. It's where you put mechanisms in place that makes it difficult for individuals to defraud the business or corrupt people. From a detection perspective, it's about the kind of tools that you utilize to identify incidents of fraud and knowing where to go and look for it. And once you've identified those incidents of fraud through the mechanisms that you've put into place, to then investigate accordingly, determine whether there is merit to allegations, for instance, received from whistleblowers or where internal audit had identified certain activities which pose or indicate red flags that fraud might be occurring and the likes. We investigate those and we confirm or refute the allegations, and then we lastly also assist our colleagues in their respective operating divisions or a group in terms of implementing consequence management. So that very much is what we call, the triangle of fraud prevention, detection, and investigation activities.
That sounds like such a critical role, especially with the increasing complexity and propensity of fraud today. It's clear that your work involves not just detecting fraud, but also investigating and preventing it across multiple fronts. It must take a lot of coordination and expertise to stay ahead of the emerging threats. Tell me, how does fraud and corruption actually impact Transnet?
Fraud and corruption, if one looks at it, from a research perspective, I'll give you the researched answer indicates that as members of the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners, the ACFE has determined that fraud and corruption can cost a business up to 5% of its revenue earned. Now, if one looks at the size of Transnet and applies that number, imagine where that 5% could have gone in terms of advancing the company forward, what it could have done in terms of creating a better space for employees as well as a better experience for South African citizens utilizing our service offerings. So it has a huge impact on not just revenue to the company, but I think it also impacts on morale within our business when we see wrongdoing and it's not addressed accordingly. So yes, it is an aspect that needs attention on a constant basis, and action needs to be taken accordingly.
Okay, that really puts into perspective how extensive the effects of fraud and corruption can be. With such a crucial role in the country's infrastructure, it's clear that the stakes are high. Combating these issues must require a lot of strategic planning and cooperation across different teams. Now, what proactive measures does Transnet take to prevent fraud? And how do you ensure that employees are aware of fraud risks and prevention strategies?
Fortunately, this is not a fight that we as investigations fight alone. Transnet follows what is called a combined assurance model, and the investigation space is at level two. I'm not going to go into the detail of the different levels, but there are a multitude of entities that are involved with looking at ethical behavior or unethical behavior now that then spills over into the anti-fraud and corruption drive. So it really starts off with policies, and I would really encourage our fellow Transnetters to have a look at the policies that are relevant to the fight against fraud. So really, the whistleblowing policy has recently been renewed and updated accordingly, and it is in line with international best practice. So that's a key tool that spells out how we manage whistleblowers, and the importance of protecting them as well as the information that they provide is a huge tool in terms of fighting and identifying fraud and corruption. Then we also have our anti-fraud and corruption policy, which is also a key tool that spells out what the specific mandate is. As investigations at Group, we are the sole entity responsible for investigating fraud and corruption, and we need to differentiate between investigations in the fraud and corruption space versus investigations in the security space, which looks at theft and vandalism. So yes, your policy and procedures associated with the fight against fraud and corruption is where it starts. The combined assurance model, which implies a close working relationship with our friends in the operating divisions as well as with internal audit and the likes. They assist greatly in terms of identifying red flags and potential acts of fraud and corruption. We also, of course, have our investigation team itself, that responds to allegations and manages and conducts investigations on behalf of the business. And we also then utilize external service providers to augment our external to augment our internal capacity and capabilities. And very important, we build and maintain and have fantastic working relationships with entities such as the Special Investigating Unit, as well as law enforcement, the Hawks or the DPCI. So it really is a combined effort. It's a team effort, and yes, it does take coordination, but it's also very fulfilling in terms of addressing it and taking the company forward.
Thank you for that. I think you've definitely described very important points. Preventing fraud doesn't just happen at the top level, it has to be part of the culture across the entire organization. It takes a lot of effort to keep everyone in the loop, vigilant about the potential risks. Could you also kindly explain the concept of whistleblowing? Why is this concept important? And give us a bit more detail on how the hotline actually supports this.
Yeah, whistleblowing is a key factor that assists us in terms of identifying fraud and corruption. I'd even go as far as to say that more than half of our investigations are initiated by by whistleblowers, and I'm happy to say that the quality of our whistleblowing reports is really of a high level and a high percentage. So it goes a long way in terms of assisting us in identifying perpetrators, identifying the nature of the activities that has been conducted, that focus our efforts on uncovering evidence where it assists us improving or refuting said allegations. Um, and once again, not to cite research per se, but I can say that whistleblowing is by far the most effective tool in alerting an organization towards wrongdoing. And it makes sense because people take ownership of our business, and they want to make Transnet a better place. And I can with in all trust say that we manage whistleblowers. And we respect anonymity. We encourage whistleblowers to come forward. And in terms of the hotline, we utilize an external service provider. We have no access for instance, as investigators to call centers or what is reported to the call centers, and that is to protect the whistleblowers and should they wish to remain anonymous, so there is that gap that protects the whistleblower from the business, whilst at the same time affording them opportunity to report. And what's also fantastic about our external hotline service provider is it does cater for most of the languages in South Africa. So you can actually report beyond just English. You can report in many other of our local languages, which I think also makes it easier for people to convey the message, and they then assist us in terms of capturing the call, converting it into a report, and only we as investigations have access to the whistleblower hotline reports. And that is, of course, to protect the whistleblowers and the information they provide. So yes, whistleblowing is by far a key tool in the fight against fraud and corruption. I just want to encourage my fellow Transnetters to continue doing so and make use of the tool. It's there for you to report. Now, I would want to also at the same time encourage people as far as possible to utilize the hotline for reporting fraud and corruption. But we also see that many translators do report unethical behavior and continue to do so. It is there for that. And we receive a multitude of these reports, and we will provide you with feedback should you require such, in terms of progress on investigations, and should consequence management have happened, what the outcomes of those reports are. So yes, whistleblowing, very important. The hotline is at your disposal, utilize it, but also should you want to utilize some of the other channels, such as going online, welcome to do so. There's a toll-free number as well, where you can report. So you'll see with the anti-fraud week or the fraud awareness week, the respective reporting channels are available. So please contact us at any time. Thanks.
Thank you for that. It's clear that whistleblowing plays a very crucial role in upholding transparency and integrity within the organization. The hotline is definitely a critical tool in ensuring that the company operates ethically. Now, let's talk about two important concepts in fraud prevention, being lifestyle audits and security vetting. Now, some of our employees could be familiar with these terms in terms of our policies or employment contracts. However, for the listeners who may not be familiar or adequately acquainted with these concepts, could you briefly explain what each of these terms mean? And is there any connection between the two?
Yes, there is often the two functionalities are very often confused, or whether one is mistaken for the other. So I'll give you a quick background in terms of what the purpose is of the two. And I think the reason for the confusion is the obtaining information in terms of the individual for different reasons. So you would utilize the same information, but the purpose is different. So let me explain. When one looks at the lifestyle audit, and one typically asks for information in terms of, as an example, whether employees have interest in companies, whether they have directorships, and whether they're earning income from other streams, etc. The purpose of the lifestyle audit is to determine whether the individual's lifestyle is in line with their income. In other words, from a definition perspective, whether lifestyle is commensurate with income. And the reason is quite simple. If you're living beyond your means, it might imply that you're earning income from other activities which might not be in line with Transnet's ethical expectations. So typically, where you have a business that is doing business with Transnet and you're earning income from that, that is typically what could be uncovered by the conducting of a lifestyle audit. Or where you're doing business outside of your time, which you haven't declared, which impacts on your ability to actually work within Transnet because of all the time you're spending on your own private business affairs. Those are the kind of things that are typically uncovered from the lifestyle audit process. And where that income or where the lifestyle is not commensurate or in line with your what would be your normal salary, then that would in all likelihood result in further investigations to determine whether the income that the individual is earning creates a conflict of sorts. Whereas if we look at the security vetting process, the security vetting process is we have an in-house security vetting team that reports to the group chief security officer. And in essence, the in-house capacity is conducted on behalf of the state security agency who is responsible for the issuing of security clearances. So the security vetting scenario is where a determination is made as to whether the individual is competent to handle government information. It's about their security competence. And where the overlap sometimes happens is where an individual might be compromised in terms of untoward relationships with entities they should not have relationships with, whether that has the potential for them to not be able to manage aspects associated with government security. So there's quite a difference. The linkage is that the same information is used to determine whether, for instance, the individual's lifestyle is commensurate with the income, and then alternatively whether there is any aspects pertaining to individual's lifestyle that could compromise them from a security perspective. That's the difference between the two. Transnet has got policies associated with each two of those functionalities, and we once again encourage people to be as to commit to the process when they are asked to do so. Thanks.
That's really interesting and very informative as well. It sounds like both of these concepts play a crucial role in ensuring the integrity and security of the organization. So, as we know, fraud tactics evolve. Criminals become very creative in terms of how they commit offenses. So, of course, must our strategies to combat these. How does Transnet evolve and evaluate and improve from fraud prevention strategies over time?
Yeah, very good question, Boitumelo. The we as transit investigations are our team members are members of what is called the Association for Certified Fraud Examiners. It's an international body that tracks and monitors all trends and patterns associated with financial crimes across the world. There's different trends and patterns emerging in different arenas across the world, but there are key themes that are constantly coming to the fore, and we need to learn from other entities in terms of how they identified these fraud patterns and what they've done to curb the activities or actions from happening. The thing that is definitely coming to the fore now is cybercrime, and also the use of artificial intelligence to facilitate acts of fraud and corruption. And then you still have your normal basic fraud activities occurring on a daily basis, and it ranges from anything from falsifying of signatures to facilitate payments to entities up to the highest level of fraudulent or corrupt activities where individuals are enticed to look the other way. So we stay abreast by following best international practice. We attend the different conferences and training events that are presented by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, and then we constantly engage with our counterparts in law enforcement as well as the Special Investigating Unit and see what learnings occur from there. So yeah, no, it's an involved process, and we're constantly staying and attempt to stay ahead of the curve.
That makes a lot of sense. It's clear that fraud prevention can't just be static. It has to adapt to new threats as they emerge. It sounds like there's a real focus on staying proactive rather than being reactive. After all, prevention is better than cure. Tell us, when a fraud case is identified, what is the typical procedure that is followed? How do you collaborate with other departments, for instance, legal? And what role do external partners, for example, law enforcement agencies and auditors, play in your investigations?
Yes, we follow a specific process that was developed in terms of the investigation cycle. And I'll use an example. Let's say, for instance, we receive an allegation via the hotline. This is a allegation from a anonymous whistleblower, and they, for argument's sake, alert us to fraud happening within a specific entity within an operating division of sorts. The first thing we do is we look at the allegation and we assess it to determine whether there's veracity to the allegation. But firstly, foremostly, does it fall within our mandate? So is there strong indications of fraud, corruption, financial crimes, etc. occurring? Does the report actually identify potential suspects? Does the report identify potential witnesses? And then, as mentioned, the activity, does it constitute what falls within our mandate? And based on that, we then assign such a matter for preliminary investigations, where the investigators then go out to determine whether there's truth to what has been provided. So, confirmation, is the person that has been mentioned an actual employee, for instance, of Transnet? Is the company, if a company is mentioned and this is pertaining to an external entity not providing services or goods to Transnet, is it an actual vendor on the list? And once those intricacies are confirmed and that there is veracity with that case, we typically then go into what we call a full investigation phase, where the allegations are investigated in detail. And this would imply obtaining evidence, whether it's from a documentary perspective or also from a human intervention perspective, where we interview people, where we interview the associated parties, and based on the outcomes there, a report is generated. It is taken through a multitude of role players to confirm that it conforms to the quality that is required to confirm and or refute to confirm or refute the allegation, and then that report is sent to management for further action to be taken or not, should the allegation not have been or should the allegation have been false or incorrect. Once that is closed off, the whistleblower, if known, is informed of the outcome, i.e., yes, your allegation has been found truthful and there's repercussions, or no. We would also, where possible, try and connect with whistleblowers to obtain as much information as possible. Hence the importance of, when Transnet's report, make sure that you report as much detail as possible that would allow us to conduct the investigation as quickly as possible. And then we would typically also assist from a consequence management perspective, where there's disciplinaries occurring. We would assist in terms of testifying at those disciplinaries, and then also report to the various entities. Should criminal behavior have been identified, we would lay criminal complaints, assist the SAPS, DPCI, or Special Investigating Unit to conduct further investigations where we did not have the ability to conduct further activities, and then also make sure that internal reporting happens in terms of the Public Finance Management Act. We work closely with the loss control officer across the ODs and within the business. So it's an involved process, lots of moving parts, but we're well versed and skilled in terms of conducting these things. Thanks.
That sounds like it can be really complex and a long process as well. And I can imagine there are a lot of moving parts, like you said, when a fraud case has been identified. It must take close coordination between various departments to handle everything efficiently. Lastly, how do you promote a culture of integrity and ethical behavior within the company?
I think the most important part is by our leadership. Our GCE has from the beginning been straightforward around the fight against fraud and corruption, and encourages ethical behavior across the business, and that includes our board, our chairperson, and all senior management. And it really comes down to leadership from the top. But also, what I find so encouraging is the number of people coming forward to report not just fraud and corruption, but what they perceive to be wrongdoing. Because for me, that's a sign that people care. And I think a lot more can be done in terms of communicating aspects around ethical behavior and what we as investigations have uncovered so that people know that things are actually happening. And I ultimately believe that the vast majority of people in our business are good, hardworking Transnetters, good, hardworking South Africans that want to see the business go forward and will not tolerate people stealing our livelihood from our fellow South Africans and ourselves and our families. So a lot can be done, I think, further in terms of communicating this, but we're on the right track, and I can already see in terms of my time period that I've spent within Transnet that there is faith in terms of reporting and making sure that the right things get done and that people that do not have our interests at heart are discouraged from doing so.
Thank you so much for that, Eric. That's certainly an important aspect of any organization. Promoting a culture of integrity and ethics goes beyond just having the right policies in place. It is about creating an environment where doing the right thing is an integral part of the company's values. It sounds like here at Transnet, you've put a lot of emphasis on fostering this kind of culture. Eric, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show, and I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot from our engaging discussion. Remember, fraud can happen anywhere, but staying informed and being vigilant, we can reduce our risks and protect ourselves and our organizations. Colleagues, reporting is very important. Be our eyes and be our ears. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Keep a lookout for our upcoming episodes on Lentswe, the voice of Transnet.